Hey guys, tonight we step back into the soft haze of ancient Rome before smartphones, before streetlights, before even the idea that bread came pre-sliced. You're waking up in a cramped little room behind a bakery, still groggy from a too-short nap on a straw mattress. The air smells of yeast and ash, and your hands are already coated in yesterday's flour. It's not even dawn yet, and somehow you're late. You trudge across uneven stone tiles, rubbing your eyes with fingers that have forgotten what clean feels like. Outside the street is cloaked in blue pre-morning stillness. A donkey snorts somewhere down the alley. You duck into the bakery, lit only by the dull orange glow of banked coals in the central oven. It's so warm inside it feels like you're walking into someone's breath. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a Roman pist or a baker, and today's going to be long, hot, and vaguely sacred. Sacred because in ancient Rome, bread isn't just food. It's stability, it's politics, it's proof that the city hasn't fallen apart in the night. And for people like you, it's also a full-time job that starts when most of Rome is still snoring into their sand-filled pillows. You roll up your sleeves and start mixing a batch of dough in a giant earthenware bowl the size of a bathtub. It's got some heft to it, like trying to wrestle an affectionate squid. The flour is coarse, scratchy. This isn't the pure white patrician flour. Yours is a darker mix full of tiny husks. It gets in your nose, you sneeze into your elbow, and someone grunts approval. The more flour on your face, the more it looks like you're working. The head baker, a grizzled man named Secundus with eyebrows like broken thatch, barks out orders. He doesn't really sleep anymore, just naps between bakes and mumbles numbers in his dreams. You've heard him mutter ratios like prayers. 4 parts water, 2 of spelt, 1 of barley, don't get clever, he says now, jabbing a finger in your dough. It's not a painting. And it's not. It's breakfast. For soldiers, citizens, and the occasional senator who swings by for a fancy honey-glazed roll, you slap the dough onto the work table and begin kneading. The rhythm is hypnotic. Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. It's oddly satisfying, like popping bubble wrap but hotter and with more historical significance. Outside, the sky shifts from charcoal to lavender. A dog barks. Somewhere a vendor is already shouting about olives. You keep kneading. You pause to wipe your forehead and stare at the oven, the real star of this place. It's a fornax, a massive brick beast shaped like a squat dome. The kind of thing that would survive an earthquake or cause one. Inside, the coals simmer like lava. The air shimmers around its mouth. It's a little terrifying, frankly. You remember your grandmother's words, never curse near the oven. Fornax hears. You're not sure you believe in Fornax, the goddess of baking ovens. But you do leave her a pinch of flour on the hearth each morning, just in case. Because yesterday you forgot, and the whole top tier of loaves burned black as a senator's conscience. Coincidence, maybe. But your kneecaps are fond of not being flogged, so you sprinkle your offering with a quiet apology. Historians still argue whether Fornax was truly a goddess with her own cult, or just a personified household spirit like Lares and Penates. Some say she's older than Rome itself, a remnant of rural fire worship. Others think she was invented by bakers who wanted someone to blame when the crust cracked. You don't care, you just want your loaves to rise. The first trays go into the oven. You wince every time the paddle slides them too close to the flame. One burst of heat can ruin the shape. The loaves need to be golden and slightly cracked on top like old tree bark. Too pale and you'll be accused of cheating the flour. Too dark and it's a sign you angered Fornax. Or worse, cut the dough with sawdust. Oh yeah, that's a thing. Some bakers desperate or dishonest mix ground up chalk ash or even powdered marble into the flour. Easier to stretch the dough, harder to digest. Last week, a baker 3 blocks down was publicly whipped for corrupting the public belly. The phrase sounds funnier than it is. You're more careful. You hum a lullaby your mother taught you and double-check every batch. Each loaf is stamped with a wooden seal bearing your shop's sigil, a stylized sheaf of wheat. That way, if someone gets sick, they know who to blame. As the sun climbs, customers begin to wander in slaves with coin purses, kids with goatskin sacks, old men with opinions about everything. You handle them all. One asks for the good, crusty one. Another just shouts round and waves vaguely. A third sniffs your bread and mutters, "Not like it used to be," as if you personally offended Jupiter. You nod, smile, and serve them. You're not here for praise, you're here for dough both kinds. By mid-morning, the street smells of warm crust and roasted grain. Your apron is stiff with flour and sweat. You sit for a moment, breathing in the steam, and think this isn't so bad. Hard work, sure, but honest. And then someone knocks over the honey jar, again. The honey jar is rolling across the floor, slowly leaking its thick, golden contents into the cracks between the tiles. You sigh a deep, dramatic kind of sigh you've perfected over the years, and grab a rag already stiff from past catastrophes. Sticky fingers are a disaster when you're shaping dough, and besides, you have about 6 minutes before Secundus notices and accuses you of summoning ants from the underworld. As you mop, the ovens behind you crackle and hiss. You glance back at them, not out of fear but respect. The fornax isn't just a tool. In Rome, that great dome of brick and fire is practically sacred. It takes up a third of the room, radiates enough heat to bake the walls, and sometimes seems to breathe. You pause with your sticky rag in hand. The oven glows softly, coals shifting like ancient eyes blinking. You're not superstitious, except you are, because this isn't just any bakery. It's one of dozens that feed an entire neighborhood on the Aventine Hill, one of Rome's more ancient and storied neighborhoods. A hill for the plebs, the workers, the grinders of grain, and the pounders of dough. And the ovens here, they run almost all day. The design is genius in its simplicity. A domed clay and brick chamber with a wide mouth fueled by dry pine and olive wood. Heat is absorbed and reflected through thick masonry, meaning you can bake round after round without restarting the fire. Some even have cleverly hidden chimneys to draw out smoke and make the air only mildly choking. You duck low to peek inside. The loaves are rising perfectly, their bottoms just crisping. You reach in with your long paddle called a pala and spin them like you're steering a boat full of sleeping passengers. You've gotten good at this. Good enough that old Secundus doesn't bark at you as much anymore. Well, slightly less. The other bakers grunt greetings as they arrive. There's Lucilla, who can roll 10 panis quadratus in under a minute, and Gaius, who swears by goat's milk in his dough, though no one can taste the difference. Then there's Andro, a hulking man with arms like cured hams who can lift sacks of grain without flinching, and once punched a rat to death. Together, you form a team grimy, loyal, exhausted. You share tricks, jokes, bruises, and burns. There's always music in the background, someone tapping a spoon on a pot, or humming a funeral dirge, ironically upbeat. A couple of the slaves sing songs from the provinces they were taken from. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm helps pass the time. Around noon, a runner arrives from a nearby patrician's villa. He's all silk and sandals, holding a wax tablet like it's sacred scripture. Urgent, he says with a sniff. She wants honey sesame libum with rosewater, warm. Of course she does. You exchange glances with Lucilla, who mutters something under her breath that probably isn't in praise of Venus. But you comply, because patricians pay well and complain louder. You retrieve the good flour, the pale stuff imported from Gaul, smooth as sifted moonlight, and begin again. While you shape the dough, you mutter a quiet thanks to Fornax. Not out of reverence exactly, more like routine. It's the same way you pat your chest twice before tossing a batch into the fire, or trace a circle in ash when it's a new moon. Fornax, the goddess of ovens, doesn't get temples. She doesn't have festivals except maybe the Fornicalia, and even that's just an excuse to eat burnt wheat and argue about dates. But in the bakery, she's everywhere. There's a tiny shrine tucked into the corner, a cracked terracotta figurine that may or may not have once had arms. No one remembers who brought it in, but someone always makes sure there's flour in her little dish. A daily tithe for the goddess of heat timing and not getting your eyebrows singed off. Historians still argue whether fornax was a uniquely Roman invention or borrowed from some older hearth deity lost to time. There's also debate about whether she was ever officially worshipped beyond bakeries, or if she lived entirely within the walls of working ovens. But for you and your peers, her presence is as real as the soot on your sleeves. A new loaf goes in, and the bakery sighs as the scent of baking crust deepens, nutty, slightly sweet tinged with smoke and mystery. You lean against the wall, letting the heat press against your back like a sleepy bear. That's when Secundus appears. His eyes are bleary, his tunic askew. He holds up 2 blackened loaves with a look of betrayal usually reserved for unfaithful lovers. These, he says, were supposed to be for the Temple of Ceres. You wince. They were the last batch. He sighs, loudly. It's fine. We'll say it's charcoal crust. Lucilla snorts. Gaius mutters something about Gothic seasoning. You all laugh because if you don't, you'll cry. The day wears on. More orders come, some extravagant, some desperate. A father brings his son in to learn the trade. A drunk soldier demands the bread with the face. No one knows what he means, but he leaves happy with a loaf that vaguely resembles a pug. As twilight approaches, the street outside glows with the last light of the sun, and the ovens finally begin to cool. You toss a few final offerings into Fornax's shrine. Some crust a few sesame seeds, a smear of honey from the doomed jar earlier. Your arms ache. Your back threatens mutiny. But there's a strange peace to it all, the smell of bread, the hum of tired voices, the dance of light against brick. And somewhere deep inside that cooling oven, something shifts. A final breath of steam. A crackle like a sigh. You smile. Another day survived. Another round of loaves that didn't burn. Well, most of them. The oven is nearly dark now, its last embers smoldering like the final wink of a tired star. You sit on a flour sack, arms draped across your knees, sipping lukewarm barley water. The bakery's quieter, just the soft scuff of brooms. The clink of cooled pans, the sleepy murmur of people who've spent 12 hours elbow deep in dough. And that's when you hear it. Not with your ears exactly. More like a nudge in your ribs, the whisper of a presence behind the oven wall. The feeling that someone or something is watching. You glance at the shrine. Fornax! It's funny in a way. You grew up hearing her name like a punchline. Leave your loaf too long and Fornax will scowl. Or the oven won't heat unless Fornax is in the mood. It's not exactly theology, it's folklore. Bread folk superstition. And yet here you are dropping a spare crust into her bowl just in case she's cranky today. Fornax, goddess of fire and baking ovens, is one of Rome's lesser acknowledged deities. Not like Mars always demanding attention or Jupiter too busy flinging thunderbolts. Fornax is quiet, steady. She lives in heat and rise and fall in the exact moment when a crust sets perfectly golden. Her name comes from the Latin fornis, meaning oven, yes, the same root as furnace. You figure some ancient baker long before you was tired of blaming himself for every burnt loaf and decided the oven must be haunted. Poof, a goddess was born. The Fornicalia is her festival, though it's rarely taken seriously by those outside your trade. Traditionally, it's a day in February where families roast a bit of spelt. As an offering, not because it tastes good, it doesn't, but because it's old, humble, and in a way, her favorite. Historians still debate whether Fornax was ever truly personified as a full deity, or if she was simply a metaphor like Lady Luck or Murphy's Law. Some scholars argue her worship was confined to households and hearths, not public altars. Others suggest the Fornicalia predates the Republic itself, inherited from Latin tribes, who prayed to the flames long before Rome had senators. You don't know about all that. You just know the oven behaves better when you say thank you. You lean back, letting your head thud softly against the brick wall. Someone across the room sneezes flour. Someone else is already snoring, curled up on a pile of grain sacks like a cat. The thought crosses your mind, why don't more people know about Fornax? Probably because she's unglamorous. There's no grand myth where she defeats a monster or tricks Zeus. She doesn't turn into a swan or demand a temple carved into a mountain. She just makes sure your bread doesn't come out raw in the middle. Still, the bakeries love her. You've seen small tokens tucked near ovens, bits of bronze shaped like loaves, charms of fire made from painted bone, even a tiny figurine where Fornax is imagined as a plump woman with soot on her cheeks and her hair tied up with twine. Not officially sanctioned, but comforting. Some say she walks the ovens at night checking temperatures. Others whisper she hums lullabies to help the dough rise. Lucilla swears Fornax pinched her once when she cursed at a broken paddle. Gaius claims he saw her once in a puff of flower arms, folded unimpressed. You smile. Maybe she's real. Maybe she's just the way bakers cope with chaos. Either way, she's yours. As you drift in and out of sleep, the bakery grows impossibly quiet. Even the coals stop crackling. In this stillness, your thoughts turn to your hands. Look at them cracked knuckles, flour-caked nails, one thumbnail perpetually black. From that time, you drop the oven paddle. These are baker's hands. Hands that wake before the sun and don't stop until it sets. Hands that trust timing more than luck. You remember being taught by your mother, who was taught by her aunt, who probably learned from some neighbor who swore on her crust? Baking is a lineage, a faith of its own, and every faith needs its God. You think again about the Fornicalia. Each year you go usually late because, let's face it, bakers don't get days off. You watch neighbors toss old spelt into communal hearths, half laughing. There's wine. There's arguing over who burned theirs worse. Someone always sets off the fire alarm. Well, not an alarm, but, screaming. It's not a grand ritual, no priests in gold robes, just people honoring something that quietly keeps them fed. Fornax never demands much, Just that you respect the heat, that you don't rush the rise, that you whisper her name when the dough looks suspiciously flat. A faint gust stirs the ashes in the oven. You shiver despite the warmth. Maybe she's here now. You glance at the shrine again. The flower offering is gone. You didn't see anyone take it. You close your eyes. You dream of warmth. Not fire, but that perfect, radiant heat that surrounds without burning. A soft crackle. The smell of fresh crust. The feeling of being watched not in a bad way, but in a helpful supervisor with mild disappointment in her eyes kind of way. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. She just gives you a look that says, check the second shelf next time. You wake with a snort heart thumping. The ovens are cool, but the coals still whisper. Fornax is watching. You stretch your arms overhead joints, crackling louder than yesterday's crust. Another day begins. The coals are still dull from last night, but Secundus is already jabbing them with a metal rod like he's trying to wake a lazy dragon. You shovel in fresh pine wood and olive branches, and soon the flames come alive again, curling eagerly up the brick walls of the fornax. Today you're nervous. Not because of the orders, those are the same as always: a dozen loaves for the form vendors, sweet rolls for a senator's breakfast, and a curious request for bread in the shape of a dolphin. That's definitely Gaius's fault. No, you're nervous because yesterday 2 loaves burned. And in a Roman bakery, that's not just a culinary issue, it's bad luck. Charred bread carries meaning. You'd think it's just a sign you left it in too long. But to bakers like you, it means Fornax might be displeased. You didn't insult her out loud, but maybe you forgot something. A whispered thanks. The flick of water you usually offer before firing the oven. The goddess notices these things supposedly. Lucilla notices too. You burn another loaf, she says, and we're all cursed. My sister's goats will stop giving milk and I'll have to go back to stitching sandals. You grin. They burned evenly. That's an improvement. But truthfully, there's a ripple of unease in the room. The fornicalia isn't for another month, and in the meantime, everyone's watching the ovens like they might sprout teeth. So you decide to be careful. Meticulous, even. You shape the dough slower than usual using the wooden ruler to get perfect edges. You check the flour for bugs. You hum that same sleepy tune under your breath because somehow it helps the rhythm. And then just before sliding the first tray into the oven, you whisper, "All right, Fornax, today let's be friends." The loaves go in. You watch the crusts rise like baby mountains. There's that perfect moment right when the dough expands just before the surface cracks that always feels like magic. Like you caught the dough stretching in its sleep. For a while, everything goes right. And then the flame sputters. A low whoosh and the fire dips unnaturally like someone exhaled over the coals. You freeze. Secundus rushes over. What did you do? Nothing, you say, hands up as if defending yourself from the goddess herself. It just went out. The oven groans. A real sound, not your imagination this time. The kind of noise bricks shouldn't make. One of the new guys, a wide-eyed apprentice from Hispania, drops his dough with a squelch. Lucilla crosses herself, then mutters a quick prayer to Fornax Jupiter and 3 provincial gods she made up on the spot. You step forward cautiously. The coals aren't cold, but they're sluggish, as if the oven is sulking. And that's when Secundus unblinking says, "She's testing us." There's a pause. So you're not sure if he's joking. You're also not sure you want to find out. You return to the table, decide to make smaller loaves, hoping they'll bake faster and need less heat. It's a compromise. The loaves might not rise to their full glory, but at least they won't burn. The day wears on. You keep glancing at the oven. It behaves. Sort of. The flames never return to their usual cheer. More like a simmering annoyance, like someone glaring at you across a tavern. You wonder, are there other gods like this specific, domestic, focused on one tiny thing? There are. In fact, the Roman pantheon is crowded with niche deities: Cardia, goddess of hinges; Cloacina, goddess of sewers; even Rumina, goddess of breastfeeding. If there's a task, there's probably a god assigned to it. Fornax fits right in. Not mighty, not flashy, just critical. Historians still argue whether Fornax was a true deity or a personified function of the hearth. Some Roman poets mention her only in passing. Others don't mention her at all. But ask any baker and they'll say the same: you don't disrespect the oven. You've heard tales of bakers punished for laziness, loaves that never rose again, flour that went sour overnight, firewood that smoked instead of burned. You've seen loaves come out looking perfect, only to collapse in the middle like a bad promise. Coincidence maybe, but maybe not. You remember a story from your uncle, a baker up in Ostia. He claimed a customer once insulted Fornax out loud right there in the shop. The next morning, all their yeast spoiled and the oven cracked straight down the middle. They patched it, of course, but the crack never really healed. like a scar. You glance now at your own fornax. Solid, reliable, but listening. The day ends without disaster, not a single loaf burns, but you still feel uneasy, like you were watched all day, judged. As you wipe down the table and scrub your hands with a gritty salt flour paste, you realize something odd. All the loaves today came out slightly misshapen. Still tasty, still warm, but off. Like Fornax didn't scorch them, but also didn't bless them. Neutral. You glance at her shrine, still dusty, still silent. You sweep up the last crumbs, whisper an apology you're not sure you owe, and head out into the evening air. Tonight you'll dream again of fire, of rising crusts, of a figure just barely glimpsed in the heat shimmer behind the oven mouth. And maybe she'll smile this time. Morning hits hard. You wake up with your face mashed against a sack of barley crust flakes in your hair, and the vague sensation that you've been judged in your sleep. Again, you roll upright, blinking. The others are already moving, Lucilla cracking her knuckles like a gladiator, Gaius muttering about yesterday's fire like it was a poorly written play, and Secundus, of course, pacing with a sour expression and a list in his hand. But today isn't just another day in the bakery. Today you're due for the monthly inspection. And with that comes a whole different kind of heat. Rome, it turns out, takes bread very seriously. It's not just about taste, it's about fairness. You can lie to a senator, you can swindle a landlord, but you mess with the weight of a loaf that's flirting with treason. Inspectors will be here by noon. Secundus growls, stuffing a half-burnt scroll into a cubby. If any loaf's underweight, I'm holding your arms in the oven myself. You believe him. This man once slapped a sack of flour for being too light. You get to work fast. The loaves today must be uniform. No underbaking, no tricky flour substitutions, definitely no sawdust. Yes, sawdust. It's not common, but it happens. Less than ethical bakers, especially in lean years, have been known to stretch their flour supplies with some fairly creative additives. Ash, plaster dust, ground bean pods, and famously sawdust. Anything fine enough to blend in and cheap enough to ignore. The punishment. If you're caught, it's more than just a fine. Public flogging, confiscation of all goods. In extreme cases, banned from the trade entirely. And for a Roman baker, that's a social death sentence. You double-check your scale. A brass counterweight shaped like Mercury's winged sandal. Probably not regulation, but close enough. You begin measuring batches, carefully dividing the dough into exact portions. Lucilla eyes you as you work. You making bread or counting denarii? Both, you say. Bread is money. And it is, especially in Rome, where the annona the grain dole is one of the most politically important tools in the city. Bread keeps the people calm. Fed citizens are sleepy citizens. No revolts, no riots. Everyone wins. Of course, that also means bakers are under constant pressure. Bake enough. Don't cheat. Keep the loaves identical. Smile, but not too much. Today, you're making panis quadratus, Rome's most iconic bread. A round loaf scored deeply into 8 wedges. It looks like a flattened flower or a small wheel. Easy to portion, easy to carry. You stamp each loaf with the bakery's official mark, a carved wooden mold pressed onto the dough like a seal on wax. It's required by law. That way, if someone gets food poisoning, the inspectors know who to blame. Comforting. The funny part? No one really knows who invented the panis quadratus. Historians still debate whether it originated in Rome or was copied from Greek methods. Some argue it evolved purely for convenience, easier to divide among large families or slaves. Others suggest religious symbolism, 8 as a sacred number, maybe tied to Saturn or early ritual calendars. You just know it bakes well. The oven glows hot and ready. You shovel in the first tray, then the second. The fire crackles cooperatively today, no pouting flames, no ghostly sighs. It's almost suspicious. Then again, maybe yesterday's burnt offering satisfied Fornax. Or maybe she just likes the smell of sawdust-free bread. By mid-morning, the inspectors arrive. 2 of them dressed in official togas with creased expressions and hands folded behind their backs. They look like men who haven't smiled since Caesar was in sandals. Secundus meets them at the door. We've weighed everything twice. You'll find no fault here. They grunt. One begins poking at loaves on a cooling rack with a long iron stick. The other pulls out a set of brass weights and begins testing random loaves on a scale. You hold your breath. The loaves pass. Each one is within the legal weight, stamped clearly, no funny smells or textures. You swear the inspector sniffs a loaf just to make sure it doesn't contain goat hair or ground marble. Satisfied or perhaps bored, they scribble a few notes, mutter something about civic duty, and leave without ceremony. The room exhales in relief. Gaius immediately drops onto a bench, muttering, "If I ever become an inspector, just push me into the Tiber." Lucilla smirks, "If you already complain like one." You laugh, the tension lifts, you survived another inspection. Still, you can't help but glance at the oven. The loaves in there are nearly done. You watch the crusts firm up, steam puffing from tiny cracks like sighs of contentment. It's funny, you think. For all the rules, regulations, inspections, and gods, the real challenge is simple: getting the timing right. The moment between raw and burnt, between too heavy and too light, between flavor and punishment. Baking is balance. Science, luck, worship, and guesswork all in one sweaty, flour-caked profession. You reach for a loaf, test its weight in your palm. It's warm, solid, honest. Good enough for Fornax, Lucilla asks. You nod. She hasn't smited us yet. You share a small smile one only bakers understand. The kind of smile that means we did it. The bread didn't fall, the oven didn't rage, the law didn't bite. For now. You place the last loaf on the shelf with a soft thud, dust your hands off, and thank the oven out loud. Because even if Fornax is a myth made up by soot-stained dreamers like yourself, it's nice to think someone's watching, even if it's just to make sure you don't forget the salt. Later that night, you find yourself back in the bakery again, not because of duty, but because of dreams. Real ones this time. You tried to sleep, really. Got all the way to your pallet, even tucked your flour-dusted feet under a blanket. But sleep? No chance. Your mind kept wandering to that oven. It always does. You slide open the wooden door. The bakery is ghost quiet. The fire's long since died, but the walls are still warm, holding on to the day's heat like old memories. You tiptoe across the tiles, instinctively avoiding the creaky ones, and step into the glow of a single oil lamp. That's when you see him, Andro. The huge man with arms like smoked hams lying half on half off, a sack of rye snoring like a gladiator with a sinus problem. His lips are moving. You lean closer. He's kneading in his sleep. His fingers twitch rhythmically, pressing and folding invisible dough. A sleepy half-smile crosses his face. 2 turns. Then rest, he murmurs. You suppress a laugh. This isn't unusual. You've seen bakers sleepwalk through entire prep sessions. It's what happens when your life becomes one long series of measurements and muscle memory. Your body doesn't stop just because your mind clocks out. Lucilla calls it ghost baking. And she's not wrong. Some nights the bakery feels like a haunted place by old habits, old gods, and the ghosts of every loaf you've ever scorched. You grab a cup of watered wine from the jug near the back and take a long sip. The lamp flickers. This place never truly sleeps. Because you're not just bakers, you're a strange little community bound by flour and fire, a hierarchy forged by burns and blisters. At the top is Secundus, master baker-keeper of the fire and unofficial high priest of Fornax. No one questions him. Not because he's terrifying, though he is, but because he knows the oven like it's an extension of himself. Below him, skilled hands like Lucilla and Gaius, trusted to mix, shape, score, and load. They don't need instructions, just a nod. And then the rest of you. Apprentices, runners, night assistants, sweaty sore, perpetually hungry for sleep and praise. You get the jobs no one else wants, scrubbing the oven floor, lifting flour sacks, hauling bread to grumpy customers before sunrise. And below even you, the slaves, there are 5 in this bakery. Quiet, steady, often more skilled than anyone admits. They rarely speak unless spoken to, but they listen. They remember. One of them, little Corvinus, can shape a roll into a perfect fish with just 3 motions. He's 10. You sometimes forget that the slaves don't leave, don't rest unless told, don't get praised even when they save the whole batch from tipping over in the oven. Rome runs on their hands, and bakeries like this are no exception. Still, there's camaraderie, not official, not allowed. But it exists. You've shared jokes, snuck extra crusts, covered for one when a bucket slipped. It's subtle, unspoken bonds formed under heat and pressure. Historians still argue whether slave bakers in Rome had paths to freedom. Some inscriptions suggest yes freedmen who earned their way out of servitude by mastering the trade. Others argue it was rare romanticized, that most worked and died beneath the same ceiling they were bought into. You don't know what's true, but you know that if anyone deserves freedom, it's Corvinus, who once patched a burning oven with nothing but a wet rag and a glare. You glance at him now curled up near the hearth, one hand resting on a bit of cooling crust like a blanket. Don't steal that, you whisper with a smile. The bread in Rome is life. Not just metaphorically, but literally. It's calories, comfort, currency. A good baker can feed a household, a great one a whole block. And so the people here, slave or free, become part of something bigger than themselves. Not just dough and fire, but trust. Daily ritual. Predictability in a chaotic city full of chariot crashes, political unrest, and whatever Jupiter's up to this week. You take another sip of wine and lean against the wall. There's a groove in the bricks here, just where your shoulder fits. You carved it yourself last summer during a long night shift. It's a tiny mark, almost nothing. But it's yours? Your little proof that you're part of this place? You hear a rustle behind you. Andro rolls over and mumbles she's watching the crust again. You blink. Who? He doesn't answer, just snores louder. You look toward the oven. It's dark, cold. But still, you feel it. The presence. The weight of a gaze that doesn't come from eyes, fornax, or memory. Or maybe just the part of your brain that never stops counting how many minutes since you last checked the temperature. You place your empty cup on the table, brush a bit of flour off your sleeve, and whisper half out of habit, half out of hope. Good night, old girl, keep watch. You head out into the cool air, your body exhausted, your mind still baking. Behind you, the bakery sleeps, but not deeply. It's a place of rhythms, of dreams that smell like wheat, of hands that never really stop moving. And in the silence, the oven waits. The rooster crows. You curse it softly like a friend who always shows up too early and rise from your pallet with a groan. Your spine pops, your knees protest, your hands permanently flour-dusted flex instinctively. Another day begins. Today you're not in the bakery. Today you're out delivering. Secundus has selected you for a special run loaves for a wealthy patron. Not just any patron, mind you. One of those patricians with too many rings and not enough personality. The kind who wants their bread slightly warm, faintly scented with bay leaves and stamped with their personal sigil. I trust you not to eat them, Secundus had said, eyeing you like you might bite into the cargo mid-delivery. So here you are, basket in hand, weaving through the early morning chaos of the Roman streets. It's still cool, the stone roads slick with dew and last night's spilled wine. The scent of olives, smoke, and whatever someone burned for breakfast hangs in the air. Your path takes you through the Forum Rome's bustling cattle market. You dodge a runaway pig hop over a suspicious puddle and sidestep a philosophical argument between two toga-clad men yelling about the price of salt. You finally reach the villa. It's massive, all-polished marble and columns that serve no purpose except to impress people who think columns mean intelligence. A house so clean you feel dirty just standing outside it. A doorman lets you in without looking at you. You're just the bread person. He points toward the kitchen with a flick of his finger. Inside, you hand off the loaves to a sour-faced cook who inspects them like he's judging fine art. He nods once. Good. The lady will serve these at her morning salon. Ah, yes, the salon. The elegant morning gathering where patricians sip diluted wine, nibble crustless bread, and pretend they understand poetry. You wouldn't be caught dead there. Too much perfume, not enough real food. Still, your bread will be the star. Because even among Rome's elite, bread holds power. Especially during election season. You pass through the villa's atrium and catch sight of the patron herself, draped in ivory linen surrounded by flatterers. She's talking about grain prices with the confidence of someone who's never milled anything in her life. But there on a silver tray are your loaves. You pause. They're still warm, faintly golden, perfectly scored. Each stamped not with your bakery's mark, but with the patron's crest, a lion holding a scroll. Classy. The guests murmur admiration. One asks what bakery is this, and the patron, without missing a beat, says, "Oh, just something I had made specially." You blink. You made that bread. Lucilla shaped those loaves. Gaius stoked the fire. And this silk-clad lion enthusiast just takes credit. You're not even surprised. Because in Rome, this is how it works. Bread is social currency. A gift, a bribe, a subtle flex. Want your neighbor's vote? Send him a honey loaf. Trying to get your cousin elected? Distribute free panis plebeius at the bathhouse. Need to soften a senator's stance. A custom-stamped wheat roll goes a long way. Historians still argue whether this type of bread bribery was technically legal. Some say it was just smart marketing. Others point to laws meant to curb excessive gift-giving during campaigns. But loopholes, as always, were the Roman specialty. You once heard of a baker in Trastevere who made loaves in the shape of voting tokens. His shop mysteriously burned down a week before elections. Coincidence highly unlikely. Back outside, you shake your head and start the walk back. Along the way, you pass a small crowd gathered around a man reading from a scroll. You pause. It's one of those political declarations, big promises in bigger words. Bread for every citizen, he shouts. No more watery porridge for our soldiers. The crowd cheers. You smirk. That's your bread he's promising, your sweat, your ash-covered tunic, your burns. And yet you're not angry. Not really. Because you know the truth, the city depends on you. On Secundus, on Lucilla, on the ghost who hum lullabies into the dough and the goddess who watches from the flames. They may not thank you, they may forget your name, but they'll eat your bread, they always do. As you turn the corner back onto your street, a kid runs past you, clutching a torn hunk of crust like it's treasure. You grin. Back at the bakery, the air is warm with rising dough. Gaius is humming. Lucilla's yelling at the flour again. Everything is normal. You place the empty basket on the counter. Did she say anything? Secundus asks. You shrug. Said it was good. He nods. Of course it was. And just like that, you're back to shaping dough. Press, turn, fold. The rhythm is calming. Honest. You wonder if Fornax saw the delivery. If she heard the lies, if she minds. Probably not. She's seen worse. After all, Rome runs on bread, and bread runs on you. The bakery smells different today. Not bad, just odd. Smoky, but with a sweet, almost perfumed edge. You sniff again and wrinkle your nose. Did someone use olive oil soap on the firewood? Lucilla elbows deep in dough, doesn't look up. Gaius brought in new flour, says it's from near Vesuvius, supposed to have volcanic minerals. You raise an eyebrow, so we're baking with lava now. She shrugs, if it sells. You cross to the storeroom and find the sack tied with fancy twine labeled with looping letters Farina Vesuviana. Dramatic, pretentious, suspiciously light. You pinch a bit and rub it between your fingers. Fine, almost silky. Definitely sifted more than once. You sniff again, there's a faint mineral tang like ash and something citrusy. You taste it. Not terrible. Still flour, probably. You return to your bench and begin mixing a batch with the volcanic flour, curious if it actually makes a difference or if it's just another marketing trick for patricians who like to say their bread smells of destiny. Halfway through shaping the loaves, Gaius appears grinning. Brought you something else. You brace yourself, please don't be another flower. It's better. He unwraps a bundle and reveals 3 small pouches made of stitched leather. You peer inside. Amulets. Tiny charms each the size of a grape. One is a copper disc etched with what looks like a sun. Another has a piece of dried fig inside. The third, a miniature terracotta oven no taller than your thumb. For luck, he says, from the forum. That old Etruscan woman was back selling kitchen spirits. You blink, kitchen spirits. Protectors of heat, watchers of dough. She called one of them Fornacina, said it's Fornax's niece. You rub your temples, we have a goddess. Now she has a niece. Lucilla leans over, I want the fig one. No way, Gaius says. The fig is fertility. You're already angry enough without blessings. She hurls a walnut at him. You pocket the terracotta oven mostly as a joke. But later, when no one's looking, you set it quietly near the real Fornax nestled among the brick cracks. Just in case. Can't hurt. Bakers are a superstitious breed. And not without reason. You've seen too many coincidences. Too many loaves collapse on unlucky days. Too many blisters earned on feast days you forgot to honor properly. One time Secundus swore he saw a face in the fire. It blinked. He didn't sleep for 3 days. And Gaius. He won't bake without his lucky apron, the one with the faded fish stitched into the hem. He claims it was made by his mother, but you're pretty sure Lucilla embroidered it during a slow shift just to mess with him. You finish the volcanic batch and slide the loaves into the oven. The air thickens instantly richer somehow, more electric. You step back. The loaves crackle like usual, but the smell is different. Sweet earthy toasted in a new way. Even Secundus raises an eyebrow when he walks by. You change the firewood. Nope. He grunts. Huh. When the loaves come out, they're darker than normal, beautifully blistered with faint gold flecks in the crust. You tap one and it sounds perfect. Hollow. Crisp. Alive. Lucilla takes a bite, chews thoughtfully. Tastes like lightning. Gaius nods, like bread from a volcano priest. You bag up a few and set them aside for high-paying customers. The rest go to the stall out front. Within an hour, they're gone. People love stories. Bread with a tail sells faster than plain loaves. Baked with the heat of Vesuvius. Blessed by the mountain. The ash of the gods in every bite. You roll your eyes at the slogans Gaius shouts, but you can't deny it works. Even the slaves ask for seconds. You're halfway through cleanup when Lucilla pauses, hands on her hips. You notice anything weird today? You nod. Besides everything, the loaves didn't need turning. You blink. She's right. Normally, halfway through baking, you rotate them so the crust forms evenly. But not today. Today, they browned perfectly on their own, as if the heat moved precisely where it was needed. You glance at the oven. It looks the same, but something's different. The way the light flickers, the silence in the bricks. A presence. You murmur Fornax. No answer, of course, just the warm creak of cooling stone. Historians still argue whether Romans truly believed in magical amulets and elemental gods, or whether it was all just psychological comfort ways to cope with difficult work. But in this bakery, you believe. Maybe not in names, but in energy, in rhythm, in the feeling you get when the dough listens. The wind shifts outside. A soft breeze curls through the open doorway, fluttering the flour on the table. It lifts a scrap of parchment and sends it sailing into the fire pit, poof gone in a wink of smoke. You watch the ash rise. You think the mountain flower had something in it, you ask. Lucilla shrugs. Minerals, sulfur, maybe a tiny goddess trapped in the bag? You chuckle. But later that night you sneak one of the loaves home. Break it open slowly. Hold it to your ear like a seashell. It crackles faintly, like someone whispering a recipe you don't quite understand. You dream again. It starts the same way it always does. You're standing in front of the oven, the bakery, empty, the world outside silent, as if Rome herself has paused to take a long, drowsy breath. The fornax glows no flames, just a golden radiance that pulses like a sleeping heartbeat. You step closer. Your hands aren't covered in flour, they're clean, smooth, which is how you know it's a dream. Inside the oven, something moves. Not coals, not firewood. A shape. It forms slowly in the heat, shimmer a woman, or maybe the idea of one. She's made of light and soot and the soft crackle of a perfect crust. Her hair is piled up like stacked loaves. Her arms are folded across her chest. Expression unreadable. Not angry, not warm. Watching. You blink. Fornax. She steps forward, not walking exactly, just appearing closer. Her eyes flick to the floor where a loaf sits cooling on stone that should be too hot. She gestures at it. You look down. It's your loaf. The volcanic flour batch. Except this one's split open down the middle, not badly, just enough to form a shape. A crescent, a curl, a spiral. And inside it, etched as if by steam, is a message. You lean closer. You wake up. The bakery is cold. Early morning. Not even the fire's been lit yet. You sit up, heart thudding softly, unsure if the dream was unsettling or oddly reassuring. The image of that spiral-shaped crust is still in your mind. You swear you could almost read the message. Almost. You rise, wash your face in the cracked basin near the back, and shuffle into the prep room. The others aren't here yet, but the oven is, and it feels different. You step closer. The bricks are cool but not dead. There's a tension, a hum, like a bee sleeping under the stone, waiting. You whisper, I know you were there. There's no answer, of course not. You begin prepping anyway. It's easier than thinking too hard about dreams and deities. And today's a big day. You're making bread for a wedding. A whole cartload of it. The order is from a family on the Palatine Hill upper crust, if you'll excuse the pun. The bride's parents want symbolic loaves, round ones for unity, braided for fertility, tiny coin-shaped rolls with stamped initials, and even one massive ceremonial loaf meant to be broken by the couple during the feast. No pressure, Gaius says, yawning as he ties on his apron. Lucilla snorts. If they're rich, they won't eat it. Just wave it around for luck. Still, you all put in the effort. The dough is mixed with eggs, honey, and a sprinkle of poppy seeds. You shape it carefully, hands steady. This is the kind of bread that gets remembered, the kind that ends up in stories or lawsuits. As you bake, your mind drifts back to fornax, the dream, the spiral. Historians still argue about dream visitation in Roman religion. Some believe the gods only spoke to augurs and priests. Others suggest household spirits, lares penates, even obscure deities like fornax, preferred the humble, the honest, the dusty-fingered. You'd like to believe the second theory, that the gods speak in flour instead of thunder. As you place the wedding loaf into the center of the fornax, you whisper, be kind. And fornax, whatever she is, listens. The loaf comes out flawless, golden, radiant. It gleams faintly even in shadow. Gaius raises an eyebrow. Did you polish it? You grin. Just good fire. Lucilla leans in. That's fornax's smile right there. You wrap the loaf in linen and load it into the cart. The driver barely acknowledges you, but he places it carefully among the wine jars and flower garlands. Later, you hear the wedding was a success. No feigning, no riots. The couple didn't even drop the bread. But that night, you stay behind in the bakery. Alone. Just you in the oven. You light a small fire, not for baking, just enough to warm the space. You bring the terracotta amulet. You place it beside the flame. Then carefully you shape a single loaf. No order, no rush, no audience. Just for her. Flour, water, salt. Nothing fancy, but you take your time. You fold it gently, score the top with a spiral, like the one from your dream. You whisper thank you and slide it in. The loaf bakes silently. No crackling, no hissing, just warmth. When it's done, you place it at the foot of the oven. You don't eat it. You don't wrap it. You leave it there, steam rising in the quiet like incense. You turn away, head to your palate. And just as you lay down, the oven gives a soft sigh. A little exhale. Content. It starts with a rumor. You hear it from a grain runner who heard it from a fishmonger who definitely heard it wrong in the first place. But the gist is this flour is scarce. Again. Something about delayed shipments from Egypt. Something about a storm sinking 2 cargo ships. Something probably about Jupiter being in a mood. But when the grain doesn't arrive, the consequences ripple through the city like heat through stone. The price of bread jumps overnight. Not your bread, of course. Secundus keeps your prices fixed, honest as he says, because we're not thieves. But elsewhere, panic, fights, Watered-down dough sold as full loaves. Markets full of shouting and short waits. Bakers accused of hoarding. Neighbors accusing each other of stuffing flour and amphorae behind their wine jugs. By midday, the mood shifts. Someone gets shoved in the forum. Another baker's stall gets overturned. People are hungry. And in Rome, hunger becomes anger very, very fast. You keep your head down and knead faster. Lucilla ties her apron twice. Gaius has stopped joking entirely. Even the oven seems to hum with tension. Fornax, you think, probably isn't pleased either. A goddess of baking likes stability, not riots. Then it happens. A man tall, red-faced, foaming with conspiracy bursts into your shop and slams a stone loaf onto the counter. This, he snarls, is theft with sesame seeds. Secundus appears before you can respond, face like a mountain in winter. That's not our loaf, he says. Too heavy, too cracked. We don't cut corners. But the man points at the crust. Your mark. Look. And there it is. Barely visible, stamped into the bottom your bakery's sigil. Lucilla leans over. That's not our stamp. You nod. It's crooked and reversed. A forgery. Which is worse than theft. It's slander. You try to explain, calmly, rationally. But the man isn't listening. His voice rises, drawing a crowd. They cheat the scales. They water the flour. They starve the streets. People start muttering. You've never felt this kind of heat before. Not from the oven, from people, from suspicion. Gaius whispers, we need to get the prefect. But it's too late. Someone throws a turnip. It bounces harmlessly off the wall, but it's enough. A chorus of voices rises loud, angry. A woman shouts they store the good grain for senators. Another, they pray to a fire witch. Wait, what? You try to speak, we don't hoard, we bake daily. We don't even have a cellar, but no one hears. It's all boiling over. Flour flies. Someone knocks over a basket of crusts. Corvinus hides under a table. Lucilla's already grabbing a rolling pin like a sword. That's when Secundus does the strangest thing you've ever seen him do. He walks up to the oven, kneels, and opens it. Inside, heat steady and golden. A single batch mid-bake. He reaches in and gently removes a loaf. Then he walks to the doorway and holds it up. Look, he says, voice like gravel sliding downhill. Look what we make. The crowd quiets slightly. This is honest bread. No tricks, no shortcuts. This loaf he lifts it higher is what stands between you and hunger. Between your family and chaos. Someone mutters, but the price. We didn't raise it, you say, stepping beside him. We never do. The silence stretches. And then a boy steps forward, barefoot, nose running, maybe 7 years old. He looks at the loaf like it's a golden apple. Secundus kneels, hands it to him. Eat. The boy bites in. Crust crunches, steam curls up. He chews wide-eyed. And he smiles. That's what saves you. The tension breaks. The mob doesn't cheer exactly, but they murmur then retreat. Embarrassed, ashamed. One man even leaves a coin on the counter. Others walk off quickly, pretending they weren't yelling moments before. Lucilla lowers her rolling pin. Gaius exhales like he's deflating. Secundus straightens. Get the prefect anyway, he tells you. Let him see what almost happened. You nod, heart-pounding. The next day, the forgery is tracked to a back alley shop near the Subura. The baker, if you can call him that, was molding loaves with imitation marks using old grain and bad yeast. He's fined, flogged, and banned from trade for 5 years. Justice, sort of. But the incident lingers. For days afterward, people eye your loaves more carefully. They ask to feel them, sniff them, break one open before buying. And through it all, you keep baking. Because that's what you do. Even when bread becomes political. Even when a crust carries more weight than a speech. Historians still debate how much influence Roman bakers had over the population. Most records overlook your kind entirely. But you know the truth, bread sways hearts, calms tempers, starts revolts. You place a fresh loaf in the window, golden, honest. You whisper, keep it simple, Fornax. She doesn't reply. But the crust sings as it cools. You thought you'd seen the worst of baking in a crisis. You hadn't, because now you're not even in Rome anymore. Secundus calls you into the bakery at dawn earlier than usual, which is saying something, and tosses you a leather satchel and a scroll. You're going, he says. You blink. Going where? To the frontier, outpost near the Danube. You wait for the punchline. There isn't one. Orders from the grain office, he adds. They need someone who knows how to bake for soldiers. Someone who doesn't cry when the yeast dies. So you pack your things, a dull knife, a lucky spoon, one clean tunic, and a tiny clay figurine of Fornax. Just in case. Always just in case. 2 weeks later, after bruises from bad wagons, mosquito bites the size of grapes, and enough flat singing from legionnaires to make your ears resign, you arrive. It's not a town. Not really. More of a suggestion of civilization huddled inside a wooden fort. The barracks are neat, the soldiers gruff. The flour absolutely tragic. Coarse, clumpy, full of little black specks you hope are just seeds. You're shown the bakery, which is a generous term. It's a clay oven the size of a donkey's skull and a stone bench with a dent in it. There's no roof. No tools, no help. You sigh and begin. First water from the nearby stream. Questionable. You boil it. Twice. Second wood for the fire, mostly damp. You dry it in the sun while swatting horseflies. Third flour. You sift it with your hands, picking out pebbles and what you think was a beetle. Finally, the dough. It comes together like a sulky child, gritty, reluctant, and full of complaints. You whisper to Fornax, "You got me here. You better not abandon me now." Then you bake. Not beautiful loaves, no air pockets, no golden crusts, just slabs, flat, dry, dense. Panes militares, hardtack. Soldiers eat it dipped in watered wine or softened in soup. You try a bite and nearly crack a tooth. But they cheer. Because it's bread. And it didn't taste like charcoal, that's enough. One soldier, big guy, bad haircut, smells like boiled leather, slaps your back so hard you nearly land in the fire pit. Best bread I've had since that time in Hispania. You're not sure if that's a compliment or an insult to Hispania. You begin to settle into a rhythm. Wake, mix, bake, sleep under stars, swear at squirrels. Sometimes you think about Rome, the real oven. Lucilla's sarcasm, Gaius's lopsided rolls, Secundus's gruff affection. And sometimes you think maybe Fornax came with me. Because one night while cooling the last batch under the stars, you see something strange. A glow. Not fire, not moonlight. Something flickering inside the clay oven. You walk over. Inside a single loaf, just one has cracked down the center. The crust split into a perfect spiral. Your breath catches. You kneel, press your fingers against the cooling brick, warm but not burning. The air smells like cinnamon. But you didn't use any, you're sure. The wind lifts your hair. The stars above seem to pulse. You whisper, "Still watching, huh?" The loaf cools. You break it in half and offer one piece to the oven. You eat the other. It tastes like home. Historians still debate whether Roman military bakers traveled with the legions or if soldiers made their own bread. In reality, both. But the smart commanders brought bakers. Morale is often as simple as a warm crust. You bake every day for 2 months. The oven becomes more reliable. You build a windscreen, a canopy. You even convince the quartermaster to give you real yeast instead of the fermented grape mush they'd been hoarding. The loaves improve. You experiment. Try spelt again. Barley, even lentil flour. The soldiers love the variety. You become known as oven hand. One even carves a tiny plaque with a loaf and leaves it by the oven door. You sleep better. Until the raid. You hear the alarm before you see anything. Horns, shouts, the clatter of boots. You're halfway through shaping dough when a soldier bursts in. Pack what you can. We move at dawn. You grab your things, spoon knife amulet, but you pause. The oven, your oven. It sits there unbothered. You run your fingers along the edge. Whisper a farewell. And leave a final offering, a small loaf marked with your bakery symbol. You stamp it with a hot spoon since there's no mold. You don't look back. A week later, you're back in Rome, dusty, hungry, grateful. Secundus grunts. Did you burn the province down? You grin, only the yeast. He nods. Good, now get in here, we're behind. You step back into the familiar heat. The real oven glows, it's missed you, you're sure of it. You pat the bricks and whisper, "I brought you something." You pull out the tiny carved plaque from the soldier, set it on the shelf beside Fornax. She doesn't answer, but the next loaf you bake. Perfect. Back in your own bakery with proper tools and real ovens, you expect things to fall smoothly into place again. They don't. Because now you've got ideas. Frontier baking, rough as it was made you bold. Creative. A bit dangerous. You've seen what dough can do under pressure and what soldiers will eat if it doesn't try to eat them first. So now that you've returned, you start to wonder, what else can you coax from these ingredients? Enter Pliny's yeast. You find the recipe scratched into a wax tablet Gaius picked up from a street scribe. It claims to be adapted from Pliny the Elder's own writings, yes, that Pliny, the guy who cataloged everything from bird behavior to the medicinal uses of crocodile dung. This one's simple Pliny-style: ferment grape skins in a sealed jar for 3 days, then mix the frothy result with flour, weight, and bake. Fermented grape skins, Lucilla asks, skeptical. It's ancient science, you say dramatically, and I am the vessel of culinary innovation. You're the vessel of whatever that smell is, she retorts, holding her nose as you open the jar. It does smell questionable, like vinegar and regret. But you press on, mixing the purple-tinged mush into flour. The dough rises, a little, maybe out of fear. Secundus watches silently, arms folded. If it explodes, you clean the ceiling. Into the oven it goes. You all wait, watching the loaves like suspicious parents at a school play. They rise. They brown. They don't explode. Success, sort of. You cut one open, steam curls out, tinged with a strange, fruity tang. You sniff it, then bite. It tastes like raisins dipped in confusion, tart, chewy, earthy. Not terrible, just weird. Lucilla nibbles a corner. It's like wine and porridge made a deal with the devil. Gaius chews thoughtfully. I kinda like it. You make a second batch, adjust the ratios. Less grape, more flour, a pinch of honey. This one is better. Word spreads. People are curious. What is this, they ask. New grain. You don't lie. Pliny's yeast from ancient times. They nod, impressed. Romans love anything ancient, especially when it sounds like something Cicero might have gagged on. The loaves become a niche hit until the senator comes in. He's tall, polished, definitely someone who hasn't needed anything in his life. I've heard he says with an amused smirk that your bakery is experimenting. You nod, within reason. He gestures to the Pliny loaf. I'll take 2, for the symposium tonight. Oh no. You try to warn him it's rustic, strong flavor. He waves a jeweled hand. My guests are philosophers. They can handle rustic. You wrap the loaves carefully. He leaves. That night, you dream of grape-scented disaster. The next morning, the senator returns. Alone. Face like thunder. I served it to Plotius, he says. Plotius thought it was poisoned. You blink. Did Plotius die? No, but he did accuse me of conspiring with the Parthians. You offer a loaf of plain bread as apology. Extra honey glaze. The senator takes it with a grunt and leaves. Well, Lucilla says now you're part of international diplomacy. You laugh but tone it down. You don't want Fornax thinking you're getting cocky. She's been quiet since your return. No dreams, no whispers, just steady heat. Reliable familiar. Maybe she's giving you space to get it out of your system. Historians still argue whether Pliny's culinary advice was ever followed seriously, or if most of it was more theoretical. Grape yeast might have been used in emergencies, but likely not for gourmet dinners. Still, the idea remains Romans loved to experiment. And so do you. After Pliny's yeast, you try other things. You fold nuts into rye. Sprinkle rose petals into semolina rolls. One time you shaped loaves to look like small amphorae. Those sell surprisingly well at a market festival. Each time you nod to Fornax, one strange loaf, then back to the basics. It's a pact she seems to accept, until you overdo it. You try saffron-infused barley bread. It melts, not like a sweet melting, like a structural collapse. The oven floor ends up coated in burnt sugar and shame. Secondus bans you from new ingredients for a week, until your imagination remembers gravity. You accept it, reluctantly. But secretly you enjoy the process, the risks. The idea that maybe Fornax doesn't want only the same crust every day. Maybe she enjoys the novelty, the challenge. Or maybe she just likes watching you sweat. That night, you clean the oven thoroughly, scraping every trace of saffron failure off the bricks. You leave a small offering, just a bit of plain dough shaped like a flame. You whisper sorry, we're back to basics now. The oven creaks gently as it cools, a sound like forgiveness. You head to bed dreaming of raisin crusts and philosophers with indigestion. It's early spring and the bakery is buzzing. Not with customers yet, but with anticipation. Because today is the Ludi Pistori, the semi-annual Bakers Guild celebration, and your team is entering the flour stacking contest. Yes, that's a real thing. And no, you didn't make it up just to get a day off. The Ludi are one part ceremony, one part competition, one part chaotic street festival with more shouting than rules. Officially, it's to honor the efforts of Rome's bakers and to give thanks to Fornax for not setting anyone's eyebrows on fire this year. Unofficially, it's a chance for every bakery in the city to flex. You arrive at the forum early hauling sacks of flour bundles of wooden paddles and a basket of offerings. Corvinus, now taller than your hip, and considerably bolder, walks beside you carrying a miniature loaf shaped like a wreath. For the altar. He whispers, do you think she watches the games? You nod. She watches everything, especially if there's bread involved. Gaius meets you at the staging area wearing his lucky apron still with that stitched fish still unwashed. Lucilla has chalk smeared on her arms like a warrior. Secundus brings a scroll likely full of old guild records or just something to wave around and look important. The flour stacking contest is simple. Build the tallest freestanding column of flour sacks in under 10 minutes. No supports, no glue, no bribes. Although last year a team tried to butter the ground of their competitor's stall. That got them disqualified and applauded simultaneously. You warm up by tossing small sacks back and forth. The crowd gathers, musicians play a cheerful tune. A group of children chant, stack that sack. Stack that sack. Secundus raises an eyebrow. Dignity is dead. You take your place on the platform. Across from you, the baker from the Trastevere district stretches like a wrestler. His team is huge. One of them has arms that look like they eat bricks for breakfast. Begin, cries the official, and the frenzy begins. You lift past balance. Lucilla crouches to align the base. Gaius swings sacks like he's pitching amphorae. Corvinus darts between you, shouting timing cues and encouragements like a tiny general. The stack grows 5, 6, 7 sacks high, teetering. You press your palm against the side, steadying it with breath and silent prayers. Around you, the crowd roars. One team's stack collapses dramatically, sending up a cloud of flour that coats several senators in the front row. No one apologizes. The senators sneeze like powdered statues. You add the final sack. 10. It holds, just barely. The whistle blows. Judges measure, compare, frown. There's dramatic pointing and whispering. Finally, one holds up a laurel crown woven from oven twine. You win. The crowd cheers, you raise a fist. Lucilla whoops. Gaius bows like a performer. Corvinus actually starts crying. Secundus nods once and says acceptable. You return to your stall and place a fresh loaf on Fornax's altar, now draped in flowers and golden wheat stalks. You light a small candle, say a few words of thanks, and imagine her presence. Eyes twinkling, arms folded, watching with her eternal flowery judgment. Historians still argue whether events like the Ludi Pistori were city-sanctioned or just spontaneous celebrations cooked up by guilds with too much competitive energy. Some say the games trace back to pre-Roman harvest rituals. Others claim they were invented because one baker got too drunk at Saturnalia and needed an excuse to redeem himself. You don't care. You love it. After the contest, the market becomes a party. Bread stalls overflow with samples. Children dip crusts into honey pots. A man juggles loaves, narrowly missing an officer's helmet. Music blares. A juggler drops a roll and yells, "The gods demand round food only." You pass by another booth offering loaf readings you pay. They break a roll open and tell you your fortune based on the crumb pattern. Lucilla pays 2 coins. The fortune teller studies her bread seriously. You will insult someone powerful and not regret it. She grins. Sounds like Tuesday. Later, back at the bakery, you unload the prize, a new bronze paddle engraved with the guild's emblem and your names. Hang it up, Secundus says. You do, right above the oven. It catches the light just right. You glance at the corner where Fornax's shrine still holds the tiny oven charm, the soldier's plaque, and the latest offering loaf. And you think if she was watching, she's probably still smiling. You whisper, "We did all right today." The oven crackles softly even though the fire's out. And you decide that next year you'll stack 11 sacks, just to keep her interested. The sun hangs low and orange, painting the bakery in warm shadows. You're alone now, the others gone home to families' taverns or well-earned naps. The oven is cooling. The bricks sigh softly with the day's final heat, and a breeze from the open door stirs the flour left on the work table. You have one last task. Today you're baking for the dead. A neighbor passed a kind old woman named Calpurnia who once traded you lemons for crusts. Her family has asked you to bake ceremonial bread for her Funis, the Roman funeral rite. You said yes, of course. Not for coin, for respect. The air feels different for this kind of baking. You don't hum, you don't joke. Even the creak of the mixing bowl sounds gentler, more reverent. You knead by instinct. The funeral loaves Liba Funebria aren't about flavor. They're offering symbols. Some are round like the cycle of life. Some are twisted, echoing knots meant to bind the soul safely on its journey. Others hide tiny messages baked into the crust, scratched in with a reed stylus before the dough goes in. You write one now, just 4 words, "May your hearth stay warm." You score it lightly into the surface, almost invisible, but there. Lucilla helped you shape these once. It's not about who reads it, she'd said. It's about putting something kind into the fire. You remember your first funeral loaf. You burned it, cried, remade it with trembling hands. Secundus said nothing, just handed you more flour and nodded. Now your fingers are steady. You press fennel seeds into the top, a nod to Calpurnia's favorite spice. You wrap the dough in a ring of dried bay leaves and set it gently near the oven's edge, not too close, not too fast. Let it rise slowly. Let it breathe. Historians still argue about the purpose of Roman funerary bread. Some believe it was symbolic nourishment for the soul on its journey. Others think it was for the mourners, a way to soften grief with ritual. Some loaves were even placed in tombs, hardened like stone over centuries, their messages unreadable but present. You like the idea that bread remembers even when we forget. The loaf finishes baking. You lift it out with care. It's golden, perfect. The scent of fennel rises like a gentle sigh. You place it in a cloth-lined basket, add a ribbon, pause. Then quietly you press your thumb into the bottom crust. Your mark, not the bakery's. Yours. You carry it through the winding streets toward Calpurnia's home. Her family is gathered in the courtyard, lamplight flickers, incense curls. Someone weeps softly. You hand the loaf to her granddaughter, who nods and clutches it like something sacred. You return to the bakery in the dark. The oven is now cold. Still, but there's comfort in its silence. You run your hand along the bricks. You'd have liked her, you murmur. She always covered her pots with cloth so the steam wouldn't escape too early. You chuckle softly. You light a small lamp and place a crust just a scrap from Calpurnia's loaf into Fornax's shrine. No prayers, no fanfare, just gratitude. You sit for a while in the quiet, thinking of people you've fed, loaves you've shaped, names you've forgotten but hands you still remember. You remember the child who laughed at rolls shaped like turtles, the soldier who cried into his bread because it reminded him of home, the patrician who never said thank you but always came back for more. Bread is memory. Crust and crumbs scored and sliced, offered and received. You rise. Blow out the lamp. The bakery sleeps. But the oven, it remembers. The morning begins the same way it always does, with ash underfoot, the soft groan of stretching arms, and that faint ancient scent of flour before fire. But today feels different. Slower. Heavier. You don't rush. No one does. There's no frantic shout from Secundus. No sudden shortage. No surprise order from a senator with a poetry club. Just peace. You and Lucilla need in companionable silence. Gaius tunes a reed flute he can barely play. Corvinus hums a tune he doesn't realize is off-key. Even the oven, that old brick heart of the bakery, breathes evenly today. You ever think about the first loaf Lucilla says after a long while? You glance up. Ever baked? She shakes her head. Ever made anywhere? First person to say, I'm going to mash this grain, add water, wait around, then throw it into fire and hope it turns into something edible. You grin. Probably someone very tired and very hungry. Definitely desperate. Probably invented fire safety the next day, too. Gaius chimes in. Or someone trying to impress a god. Hey, Jupiter, look, I made crust. You all laugh, gently, softly. It's a good day. No experiments, no volcanic flour, no drunken customers demanding dolphin-shaped loaves. Just simple bread. Honest bread. You each take a moment to bake a single loaf, not for sale, not for orders, but for yourselves. Personal loaves. Lucilla presses olives into hers. Gaius adds a swirl of date paste. Corvinus shapes his into a dog. You choose no decoration at all. Just flour, water, salt, and thyme. You score the top with a spiral. Always the spiral. When they're ready, you all sit at the table and break bread together. No fancy plates, just hands. Steam rises, butter melts. The crusts crackle like old stories. You eat slowly, reverently. Because this is the reward. Not the laurel crowns, not the coins, not even the occasional pat on the back from a patrician who thinks you live in the oven. This moment, warmth, company, bread. Secundus walks and eyes the crumbs and grunts. You better be baking another batch. But his mouth twitches, just a little. After lunch, you clean. The bakery gleams. You scrape the oven floor one last time, sweeping ash into the corners like memories into a blanket. Then you walk to the shrine. Fornax watches. She always does. You place your final loaf of the day at her feet, a small one, no mark, just a simple gift. You whisper, thank you for letting me burn, and rise. You linger, fingers resting on warm brick. The shadows lengthen. Outside, the street begins to quiet. You close the shutters, douse the lamps. Watch the last rays of light dance along the flour-scattered floor. It's been years since you first stepped into this place, clumsy, wide-eyed, and terrified of yeast. Now, you're part of it. A crust among crusts. A story in the oven's long memory. You stand in the center of the room, take one deep breath, and say, sleep well, old friend, we'll bake again tomorrow. The fire dims. The bricks glow. The air softens, and in that hush, the final hush, you swear you hear her laugh.